Have you ever felt like the book of Deuteronomy was just another ancient text with little relevance to your life today? What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about this profound book was about to be challenged? Today we're diving deep into the story of the book of Deuteronomy like you've never seen it before. This isn't your typical Bible study. What makes this exploration unique is that we're going to uncover the hidden connections between Moses' final addresses and the exact challenges you're facing right now in 2025. From career decisions to family struggles, from personal identity to societal pressure, it's all there, waiting to be discovered. To bring you this groundbreaking perspective, I've spent over 2 decades studying not just the biblical text, but also analyzing hundreds of historical documents, archaeological findings, and modern psychological research. I've consulted with leading theologians, examined ancient Near Eastern parallels, and synthesized insights from contemporary leadership studies. This comprehensive approach reveals patterns and principles that have been overlooked for centuries. By the end of this video, you'll gain a revolutionary understanding of how Deuteronomy speaks directly to your modern challenges. Practical wisdom for navigating major life transitions. Powerful insights into maintaining your identity in a changing world. Clear strategies for building lasting legacy in your family and community. And most importantly, a fresh perspective on how this ancient wisdom can transform your daily decisions. Think of this as your personal guide to unlocking one of history's most misunderstood leadership manuals. So, if you're ready to discover how a 3,000-year-old book holds the keys to your current challenges, stay with me, because what comes next might just change everything you thought you knew about success, purpose, and faith. Part 1. Moses' last stand. More than just a farewell. Picture this. The sun beats down mercilessly on the plains of Moab, casting long shadows across a sea of tents stretching as far as the eye can see. The year is approximately 1406 BCE, and an extraordinary moment in history is about to unfold. Standing before nearly 2 million people, a 120-year-old man prepares to deliver the most important speeches of his life. This is Moses, and these are his final words. But to truly understand the weight of this moment, we need to step back 40 years. Egypt, the world's greatest superpower, lies in ruins. 10 devastating plagues have brought Pharaoh to his knees. The Mediterranean's waters stand like walls, and an entire nation walks through on dry ground. This is no ordinary exodus. It's the birth of a nation, and Moses stands at its center. For 4 decades, Moses has carried these people through unimaginable challenges. When they thirsted, he struck a rock and water gushed forth. When they hungered, he prayed and bread fell from heaven. When enemy armies threatened, he lifted his hands and battles were won. But Moses' journey with them hasn't been just about miracles. It's been about transformation. Consider the magnitude of what he's witnessed. He's seen a nation of slaves become warriors. He's watched them receive divine law at Mount Sinai, where thunder shook the earth and lightning split the sky. He's grieved as an entire generation died in the wilderness due to their lack of faith, and he's guided their children to become the people God intended them to be. He screams out to the mountain, "Help them to free their souls from the power of mistake." Now, imagine the emotion coursing through Moses as he looks out at this new generation. These are not the same people who left Egypt. These are their children. Many have never seen the pyramids or felt the sting of the taskmaster's whip. They've grown up on stories of God's deliverance, but they haven't experienced it firsthand. And here's the crushing reality. Moses knows he won't be going with them into the promised land. This is where Deuteronomy becomes more than just a farewell speech. It becomes a father's final words to his children, a leader's last chance to ensure his people's success, and a prophet's ultimate opportunity to cement God's covenant with the next generation. The stakes couldn't be higher. Moses stands there, his voice still strong despite his years, and begins to speak. But he's not just recounting history, he's weaving together law, narrative, and prophecy into a masterpiece that will echo through the centuries. He knows the challenges that lie ahead, the seductive cultures they'll encounter, the battles they'll face, and the temptations to abandon their faith. The dramatic tension reaches its peak as Moses delivers his final charge. These aren't just instructions, they're a matter of life and death. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live. This moment transcends time because it captures a universal human experience, the challenge of maintaining faith and identity in the face of change. Moses' last stand wasn't just about preparing Israel for the promised land. It was about preparing all of us for the moments when we stand at the crossroads of decision, facing our own promised lands. But what made these final words so revolutionary wasn't just their timing or their delivery, it was their content. As we're about to discover, Moses was about to introduce a concept so radical it would reshape humanity's understanding of their relationship with God. Part 2. The Revolutionary Message. Picture this. The sun is setting over the plains of Moab, casting long shadows across a sea of tents stretching to the horizon. The air is thick with anticipation as thousands of Israelites gather, their eyes fixed on the weathered figure standing before them. Moses, now 120 years old, is about to deliver what would become the most revolutionary message in human history. But to truly understand the weight of this moment, we need to step back and consider the world these people knew. In the ancient Near East, gods were distant, demanding figures who needed to be appeased through elaborate rituals. They were feared, not loved, worshipped out of terror, not devotion. The very concept of loving a deity would have seemed not just foreign, but absurd. Yet here stands Moses, about to shatter every preconception about the relationship between humans and the divine. The crowd falls silent as Moses begins to speak. His voice, though aged, carries across the gathering with surprising strength. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This opening line, known as the Shema, wasn't just another religious proclamation. It was a spiritual earthquake that would reshape human understanding of God for millennia to come. But what follows next is even more astounding. Moses continues, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength." The words hang in the air like thunder. Love God with all your heart? This was unprecedented. Consider the context. These people had just spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness. They had witnessed the plagues in Egypt, seen the Red Sea split, and watched water flow from solid rock. They had experienced God's power firsthand, but now Moses wasn't talking about power. He was talking about love. This wasn't the fearful submission to a distant deity that characterized other ancient religions. This was an invitation to intimate relationship. The Hebrew word used here for love, ahava, is the same word used to describe the deep affection between family members. Moses was essentially saying, relate to the Creator of the universe with the same intimacy you have with your closest family. The revolutionary nature of this message becomes even clearer when we examine the three dimensions Moses describes: heart, soul, and strength. In Hebrew thought, the heart wasn't just the seat of emotions, it was the center of intellect and will. The soul represented the very essence of one's being, and strength referred to everything one possessed: resources, abilities, and influence. This wasn't a call for partial devotion or occasional worship. This was a summons to total commitment, to reorient every aspect of life around love for God. It was a complete paradigm shift from religion as obligation to relationship as privilege. To emphasize the magnitude of this shift, Moses frames it within a story of liberation. He reminds the people of their slavery in Egypt, where they served harsh taskmasters who demanded everything but offered no love in return. Now they were being invited into a different kind of service, one born of love, not fear. The climax of this revolutionary message comes when Moses reveals its ultimate purpose. This wasn't just about individual spiritual fulfillment. This love for God was meant to transform every aspect of society. It would shape how they treated the poor, how they conducted business, how they dealt with foreigners, and how they raised their children. This message was so radical that it would continue to reverberate through history. Centuries later, when Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, he quoted these very words from Deuteronomy. The revolution that began on the plains of Moab would reach its ultimate fulfillment in Christ, who would demonstrate what perfect love for God and neighbor truly means. But this revolutionary message came with profound implications. As the people stood there trying to grasp the magnitude of what they'd heard, Moses began to outline what this love-based relationship with God would look like in practical terms. And what he described next would challenge everything they thought they knew about success, community, and Part 3. The Blueprint for Blessing. Picture this. The sun beats down mercilessly on the plains of Moab. A sea of tents stretches as far as the eye can see, housing nearly 2 million Israelites. They've wandered for 40 years, and now, finally, they stand at the threshold of everything they've dreamed of. The promised land lies just across the Jordan River, its abundance tantalizingly. But before they can step into this new chapter, Moses delivers a message that would echo through the centuries. A divine blueprint for blessing that would change not just their future, but the course of human history. The scene is electric with anticipation. These aren't the same people who left Egypt. They're their children. A generation that grew up on stories of plagues and parted seas, of manna from heaven and water from rocks. But they also grew up hearing whispered tales of their parents' failures, the golden calf, the rebellion at Kadesh Barnea, the constant grumbling that led to 4 decades of wilderness wandering. Moses, his voice carrying the weight of 120 years of wisdom, begins to unfold God's covenant. But this isn't just another set of rules. It's something far more profound, a revolutionary concept that would reshape humanity's understanding of divine human relationships. See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse, Moses declares, his words cutting through the desert air. The people lean forward, hanging on every word. This isn't just about material prosperity, it's about a partnership with the divine that would transform them from former slaves into a kingdom of priests. The blueprint unfolds in 3 remarkable layers. First, the foundation of faith. Moses explains how their relationship with God isn't based on blind obedience, but on loving trust. This was radical for its time. Other ancient Near Eastern cultures saw their gods as distant, demanding tyrants. But here was Yahweh, offering a covenant based on love, choosing a people not for their strength, but for His purposes. Second, the structure of society. The blueprint detailed everything from economic principles to social justice. It protected the vulnerable, widows, orphans, foreigners. It established regular debt forgiveness, preventing permanent poverty. It even mandated environmental stewardship through agricultural practices. This wasn't just law. It was a vision for human flourishing that was millennia ahead of its time. Third, the promise of prosperity. But here's where it gets fascinating. The blessings weren't just spiritual platitudes. They were specific, tangible promises. Abundance in crops and herds, peace from enemies, health and fertility. Yet, each blessing came with a warning. Prosperity without purpose leads to peril. Moses recounts a prophetic warning that would prove hauntingly accurate. When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord. History would prove these words prophetic, as Israel's greatest challenges often came not in times of hardship, but but in seasons of abundance. The tension builds as Moses describes the two paths before them. Choose blessing and watch as divine favor transforms their nation into a light for all peoples. Choose to forget God and watch as the very blessings become snares. The stakes couldn't be higher. This wasn't just about their generation, but about all who would come after them. The brilliance of this blueprint becomes clear when we understand its context. Other ancient codes focused solely on behavior modification. But this was different. It was about heart transformation. The blessings weren't rewards for good behavior. They were tools for revealing God's character to the world. Archaeological discoveries have confirmed the uniqueness of this approach. While other ancient Near Eastern laws treated common people as property of the gods and kings, Deuteronomy's blueprint elevated every person as bearing divine image and worth. It was a social revolution wrapped in a covenant. As Moses concludes this portion of his address, the implications hang heavy in the air. This blueprint wasn't just about rules for success. It was about relationship, purpose, and legacy. It was an invitation to participate in something larger than themselves, a divine plan to bless all nations through their faithfulness. But even as the people absorbed these profound promises, a crucial question remained. How could they maintain this covenant while surrounded by cultures pulling them in opposite directions? The answer would come in Moses' next revelation, a strategy for cultural distinction that would preserve their identity through millennia of challenges. Part 4. Wilderness Wisdom for Modern Time. Picture this. A vast, unforgiving desert stretches endlessly under the scorching Middle Eastern sun. The year is approximately 1406 BC, and the Israelites are facing what seems like an impossible situation. They've been wandering in this wilderness for 40 years. A journey that should have taken 11 days has stretched into 4 decades of uncertainty, testing, and transformation. But this wasn't just any wilderness experience. This was God's crucible, where He would forge a slave mentality into the mindset of conquerors. The generation that had left Egypt with their backs bent from slavery had died out. Now a new generation stood at the threshold of their destiny, carrying none of the scars of bondage, but all of the lessons. Moses, now 120 years old, his face still radiant from his encounters with God, stands before this new generation. His voice, weathered by years of leadership but still commanding, carries across the plains of Moab. The promised land lies just across the Jordan River, tantalizingly close. But before they can enter, Moses must ensure they understand the profound wisdom their parents' generation paid such a heavy price to learn. The scene is charged with emotion. This is Moses' final opportunity to transfer 40 years of wilderness wisdom to a generation that would need it to survive in a land flowing with milk and honey and fraught with spiritual dangers. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years, Moses declares, his voice carrying the weight of decades of divine encounters, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Moses reveals that the wilderness wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. He explains how God used their hunger to teach them about dependence, allowing them to experience physical need before providing manna, a food they had never seen before. Man does not live on bread alone, Moses reminds them, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. The wilderness had been their classroom, and the lessons were extraordinary. Their clothes hadn't worn out. Their feet hadn't swollen despite 40 years of wandering. Every miracle, every provision, every challenge had been carefully orchestrated to teach them something profound about God's character and their own. But perhaps the most stunning revelation comes when Moses explains the true purpose of their wilderness experience. Know then in your heart, he declares, his voice rising with intensity, that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. The wilderness, with all its hardships, had been an act of divine love. a father training his children for the challenges ahead. The parallels to modern life are striking. Today's professionals navigate their own wilderness experiences, career transitions, market uncertainties, technological disruptions. Families face their own desert seasons, relationship challenges, health crises, financial pressures. The wilderness, it seems, is still God's chosen classroom. Moses' teachings reveal three timeless principles for navigating modern wilderness seasons. First, the wilderness is purposeful. Just as God used the desert to transform Israel from slaves to conquerors, our challenging seasons are opportunities for profound personal growth. Every setback, every disappointment, every delay is potentially preparing us for something greater. Second, provision follows pattern. The Israelites learned to trust God's daily provision of manna, teaching them dependence on His timing and methods. In our own wilderness experiences, God often establishes new patterns of provision that require us to trust Him in unfamiliar ways. Third, the wilderness precedes promise. Standing on the plains of Moab, Moses could finally see how every wilderness challenge had prepared Israel for their promised inheritance. Our own desert experiences often come just before significant breakthroughs. As Moses concluded this portion of his address, he drove home a point that still resonates today. He brought you out of Egypt with His mighty power, to humble you and to test you, so that in the end it might go well with you. The wilderness, it turns out, isn't a detour. It's the path to promise. But understanding wilderness wisdom was only part of the equation. The real challenge would come when they entered the promised land and faced an entirely new set of challenges. Challenges that mirror our own struggles to maintain faith in an increasingly hostile culture. Part 5. Navigating a hostile culture. Picture this. A vast desert landscape stretches endlessly under the scorching sun of ancient Canaan. The Israelites, fresh from their 40-year wilderness journey, stand at the edge of a new world. But this isn't just any territory. It's a land teeming with nations whose practices would make your blood run cold. Child sacrifice, temple prostitution, and idol worship aren't just occasional occurrences. They're woven into the very fabric of society. Moses, his face weathered by decades of leadership, knows what his people are about to face. He's witnessed firsthand how quickly cultural influence can erode faith. The golden calf incident still haunts his memory. Standing before the assembly, his voice carries both urgency and wisdom as he addresses what might be their greatest challenge yet: maintaining their identity in a hostile world. The stakes couldn't be higher. The surrounding nations, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, represented more than just military threats. They embodied sophisticated civilizations with seductive cultural practices that had perfected the art of assimilation. Their temples dotted the highlands, their festivals filled the valleys with music and feasting, and their way of life promised prosperity through allegiance to their gods. Moses understood human nature. He had watched an entire generation fall in the wilderness because they couldn't fully separate themselves from Egyptian thinking. Now, as he delivers his final address, he paints a vivid picture of the challenge ahead. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, he warns, and drives out before you many nations, you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them, and show them no mercy. These words might sound harsh to modern ears, but Moses wasn't calling for blind hatred. He was addressing a sophisticated form of warfare, cultural warfare. The command was about protecting Israel's unique identity as God's covenant people. Archaeological discoveries have revealed just how integrated Canaanite culture was. Their influence extended from architecture to agriculture, from entertainment to economics. Think about the pressure these Israelites faced. Imagine being the only family on your block who doesn't participate in the neighborhood festivals because they're dedicated to other gods. Imagine watching your children's friends all following the latest cultural trends while you have to explain why your family does things differently. This wasn't just about religious practices. It was about entire worldviews colliding. Hannah. Moses knew the pattern all too well. It would start small, a friendly invitation to a harvest festival here, a small compromise there. Before long, the unique practices that marked Israel as God's people would begin to fade. The Sabbath would become just another day, the dietary laws would seem unnecessarily restrictive, the moral boundaries would blur. But here's where Moses' genius shines through. Instead of just giving rules, he provides a comprehensive strategy for cultural preservation. He establishes systems for education, Deuteronomy 6:7-9, creating regular rhythms of remembrance through festivals and ceremonies. He institutes laws that would make Israel's communities distinctly different, from their treatment of the poor to their business practices. The climax of this cultural resistance strategy comes in Deuteronomy 7:6. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. This wasn't about cultural superiority, it was about cultural purpose. Israel's distinctiveness wasn't meant to isolate them, but to illuminate the path for others. This ancient wisdom speaks powerfully to our modern context. In a world where cultural pressure comes through social media feeds, entertainment choices, and societal expectations, Moses' strategies for maintaining identity while engaging with the surrounding culture offer surprising relevance. His approach wasn't about building walls, but about building character, strong enough to withstand influence. But maintaining cultural identity was only part of the equation. Moses knew that the real test would come when each person had to make their own choice about which path to follow. This brings us to the most dramatic moment in his farewell address, a choice that would echo through the centuries. Part 6. The ultimate choice. Picture this. The sun hangs low over the plains of Moab, casting long shadows across a sea of faces. After 40 years of wandering, the Israelites stand at the threshold of everything they've dreamed of, the Promised Land. But before them stands Moses, their leader, prophet, and father figure, about to deliver the most crucial message of their lives. The tension in the air is palpable. These aren't the same people who left Egypt. They're their children, a new generation who has grown up hearing stories of their parents' failures. They've spent their entire lives in the wilderness, watching an entire generation die because of wrong choices. And now they face their own moment of decision. Moses, his voice carrying across the multitude, utters words that would echo through millennia. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. The crowd falls silent. These aren't just words. They're a divine ultimatum. Think about the weight of this moment. Behind them lies the wilderness, 4 decades of divine provision, of manna from heaven and water from rocks, but also 40 years of funerals, of watching their parents' generation fade away because they chose fear over faith. Before them lies Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey, but also filled with fortified cities and fearsome warriors. Moses continues, his voice growing more urgent. He's not just their leader, he's someone who has witnessed the devastating consequences of wrong choices. He was there when their parents chose to believe the fearful spies rather than God's promises. He watched as rebellion at Kadesh Barnea turned a short journey into a 40-year wandering. He himself bears the weight of his own choice at Meribah, knowing he'll never enter the land he's describing. But this isn't just about ancient history. Moses is laying out a blueprint for all time. He describes 2 paths with crystal clarity. Choose life. Align with God's ways, embrace His commands, walk in His love, and experience blessing, or choose death, turn away, follow other gods, trust in human wisdom, and face. The parallels to our modern world are striking. Like the Israelites, we stand at our own crossroads every day. The choice between life and death doesn't always come in dramatic moments. Sometimes it's in the quiet decisions. Integrity in business dealings, faithfulness in relationships, priorities in daily life. The stakes were unimaginably high for Israel. Choose life, and they would flourish in the land. Their children would prosper, and they would fulfill their destiny as God's chosen people. Choose death, and they would face exile, suffering, and the loss of everything God promised. Moses' voice trembles with emotion as he pleads, "Now choose life, so that you and your children may live." This wasn't just about individual choices, it was about generational impact. Moses understood that their decisions would echo through centuries. History would prove this true. When Israel chose life, following God's ways, they experienced periods of unprecedented prosperity and peace. When they chose death, turning to idols and injustice, they faced invasion, exile, and suffering. The climax of this moment comes when Moses, with all the authority of his office and the weight of his experience, makes his final appeal. Choose life, that you may live, loving the Lord your God, listening to his voice, and holding fast to him. It's a call that transcends time, speaking to every heart that has ever stood at a crossroads. What makes this choice so profound is its simplicity, yet its all-encompassing nature. It's not about a single decision, but about the orientation of one's entire life. The Hebrew word for choose here implies ongoing action. It's a continuous choosing, a daily commitment to walk in God's ways. But as powerful as this choice was for ancient Israel, what's truly remarkable is how it points to something even greater. A choice that would change not just a nation, but the entire course of human history. Conclusion: the unexpected hope. Picture this. A weathered man stands atop Mount Nebo, his eyes fixed on a landscape he'll never walk. The wind whips around him as he takes in the sweeping vista of the Promised Land. The Jordan Valley stretching out below, the mountains of Judah rising in the distance, and somewhere beyond, Jerusalem, the city that would one day become the heart of his people's worship. This is Moses, 120 years old, his face still bearing the radiance of countless encounters with God. Behind him lies a lifetime of extraordinary experiences: the burning bush, the plagues of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. But it's what lies ahead that fills his heart with an unexpected hope, a hope that transcends even his own mortality. Let's step back for a moment to understand the profound significance of this scene. Moses, who had led the Israelites for 40 years through the wilderness, who had been their mediator, prophet, and father figure, now stands at the threshold of everything he had worked toward. Yet, because of one moment of disobedience at the waters of Meribah, he would not enter the land himself. In human terms, this might seem like a tragedy, a leader who never got to see the fulfillment of his life's work. But as Moses gazed across the landscape that day, something remarkable was unfolding. The book of Deuteronomy reveals that this moment wasn't about loss at all. It was about something far greater. Consider the deeper narrative at play. Throughout Israel's history, God had been weaving a pattern. Abraham never saw the nation he was promised become a reality. Joseph died in Egypt, far from the land of his fathers. And now Moses would join their ranks, a leader whose vision extended beyond his own lifetime. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In his final address, Moses doesn't speak with disappointment or bitterness. Instead, his words surge with hope and anticipation. He speaks of a future prophet who would be like him, someone who would lead God's people in an even greater exodus. Deuteronomy 18:15-18. He prophesies about a covenant that would be written not on stone tablets, but on human hearts. The mystery deepens when we fast forward through biblical history. Centuries later, on another mountain, something extraordinary happened. 3 of Jesus' disciples witnessed Moses himself, very much alive, speaking with Jesus about the exodus he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem, Luke 9:28-31. The same Moses who couldn't enter the earthly promised land was now present at a moment that would open the way to an eternal promise. This revelation transforms our understanding of Deuteronomy's conclusion. Moses' physical death wasn't an end but a beginning. His inability to enter Canaan wasn't a punishment but a prophetic picture. He was pointing to something greater, a leader who would not just show the way to the promised land, but would become the unexpected hope of Deuteronomy is this: what appears to be an ending often serves as God's prelude to something greater. Moses' farewell speeches weren't just a leader's last words. They were the foundation for understanding God's ultimate plan of redemption. Every command, every warning, every blessing was drawing a map that would ultimately lead to Christ. This understanding revolutionizes how we read Deuteronomy today. Suddenly, it's not just an ancient book of laws or a historical record of Israel's journey. It's a living testimony of hope that speaks directly to our modern struggles. When we face our own Mount Nebo moments, times when our dreams seem just out of reach, when our best efforts fall short, Deuteronomy reminds us that God's story continues beyond our limited perspective. As our journey through Deuteronomy draws to a close, let's reflect on the transformative wisdom we've uncovered. This isn't just ancient history. It's a living blueprint for navigating our modern challenges. Through Moses' final addresses, we've discovered timeless principles that speak directly to our deepest struggles and highest aspirations. Remember how we started? We questioned whether an ancient text could really speak to our 21st century lives. Now we see that Deuteronomy isn't just relevant, it's revolutionary. From leadership transitions to personal identity, from family dynamics to societal challenges, this book offers wisdom that transcends time. But here's the real question. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you let these insights remain academic, or will you allow them to transform your life? Moses stood at the edge of the promised land, challenging his people to choose life. Today, you stand at a similar crossroads. Think about it. When was the last time you faced a wilderness moment, a time of uncertainty, transition, or challenge? Deuteronomy shows us that these moments aren't just obstacles, they're opportunities for transformation. They're invitations to trust in something greater than ourselves. I want to hear your story. How does Deuteronomy's message resonate with your journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What wilderness are you navigating right now? What promised land are you looking toward? Your perspective might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear. If this deep dive into Deuteronomy has opened your eyes to new possibilities, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who's wrestling with change, seeking direction, or hungry for deeper spiritual understanding. Sometimes the greatest act of leadership is simply passing on what we've learned to others. And here's my challenge to you. Take one principle from Deuteronomy that struck you today and apply it this week. Maybe it's choosing to trust during uncertainty, showing courage in transition, or investing in the next generation. Whatever it is, take that step, then come back and tell us about it in the comments. Before you go, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're on a journey of discovering how ancient wisdom transforms modern life, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. Also, check out our free resource guide in the description below. It's packed with practical tools for applying these principles in your daily life. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Deuteronomy. Your engagement and thoughtful presence make these conversations meaningful. Remember, just as Moses' words echoed through generations to reach us today, your choices and actions will impact those who come after you. Until next time, choose life, embrace the journey, and never stop seeking deeper wisdom. This is Faith and Truth signing off, but the conversation continues in the comments below. Stay blessed, and I'll see you in our next deep dive into timeless truth for modern living.